County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for Wednesday, December 1st, 2021. It's 2:03 p.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. We have Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards, Commissioner Carolina Mejia, County Manager Amir Chavez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell on Zoom, and Public Works Director Jennifer Walker, and our Solid Waste Manager Jeff Bickford. And the topic for this short work session is Solid Waste Advisory Committee Bylaws. We have half an hour. Public can follow along on the county YouTube channel through live stream. And I'll pass it, sound like I'm passing it to Jeff.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you.
Your director is there to show moral support.
Thank you for having us today. I'm going to share my screen now. All right. Are you hopefully you're seeing my PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Not the presentation. Oh,
Can you put it in the slideshow mode?
Yes. There we go. All right. Yeah, so the reason I'm here today is to update you on our Solid Waste Advisory Committee recently doing a review of their bylaws. And as I'll mention later, as a result, any change to their bylaws would eventually need to be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. So just to give you a little review of the process that we've been following so far, the bylaws for the SWAC were last actually looked at and reviewed in 2017, so it's been a number of years. The staff actually reviewed the current bylaws from various other jurisdictions. For example, we looked at King County, Spokane, Whatcom. Additionally, we also looked at San Juan and Clallam County as well to see if there were things or elements in their bylaws that might make sense to be incorporated potentially in our bylaws. So based upon that review, staff suggested some draft edits and additions to incorporate the best practices and clarifications to our current bylaws, and these were presented to the advisory committee at their August 4th, 2021 meeting. So the proposed edits were brought to them, and there was a fair amount of discussion and some suggested changes to that. At their following monthly meeting on September 1st, the edits that were incorporated that were basically agreed upon by the SWAC, but as in their bylaws, they needed to have a 30-day period before they could officially adopt them. So they moved the official adoption up to their following meeting, which was on October 6th of 2021. So at that meeting, again, they formally approved the revisions by consensus with the recommendation that these changes be brought forth in front of the Board of County Commissioners for their review and hopefully for their approval of those changes. So hopefully you have a copy of the redlined version of the bylaws that was included with the package. And there's a lot of small editorial changes that didn't really affect much of anything. I'm just going to do a quick review of some of the more substantive changes. So the first one was in section 2A, which is related to the composition of the members of the committee. So previously, it was the description was more prescriptive, speaking of the specific number of members as well as what the representation would be. What the decision would be that description is also included in Thurston County Code Section 8.22.010. And so instead of having it being prescriptive here in the bylaws, it's referring back to county code, because if there's a change made in that makeup at some point in time in county code, instead of having to come back to the bylaws themselves and change those again, it would already be dealt with because it's being dealt with by reference. So figured it was a cleaner method and a cleaner way to go. And I might add, and I'm going to move through here at any point in time. Feel free to stop me and ask me any questions. The second item of substance was in section 2C, and it was a clarification on the term length of filled vacancies. And what it basically was clarifying that if a vacancy became open in a position, because typically individuals are seated for a 3-year term, but basically if that was vacated during that time, the replacement would then serve out the rest of that term, of the 3-year term, and then we'd have to look at the reappointment. Item number 3 on this list is section 2D, and this was a clarification that the committee was particularly interested in because it wasn't clear on the length of potential term for the chair and the vice chair. So it was clarified that the chair, an individual or a member, could serve up to 2 years, 2 years in the position of the chair and 2 years in position of the vice chair, and they would have to move out and on. So again, it hadn't been clear at that point. So that clarification was made. The next item was in section 2H. It had to do with just some clarification language mentioning that this related to conflicts of interest. And this is specifically what we were saying, that the individual or the member would need to specifically declare a conflict of interest when it existed. Because before I just mentioned they just had to abstain from any decisions, but that we're asking that they actually make a verbal declaration in front of the group that a conflict of interest did exist. Next up was in section 2J. It was an addition of an entire section, and it relates to subcommittees. This was not a... Sure. Certainly.
You skipped the changes on section 2E.
2E. Oh yeah, there are some, again, these were just it was just a wording change that so I only brought up the substantive ones, but yeah, for 2E, as far as the secretary, it just said that the solid waste manager or that the existing language was the solid waste manager or designee shall act as secretary of the committee. This was just saying that we will provide them with administrative support, including secretarial duties and informational resources. So it was just a little expansion and clarification of that statement that, that we're providing more than just secretarial duties, but also informational resources. And it was less specific about the solid waste manager or designee, it's just that the department would provide. Does that help?
No, yeah, we have copies of that. Just want to make sure the public also tracks this question.
Certainly.
That was the reason of my comment.
And so on the 2J, again, the subcommittees piece, it was very common language in other committees' bylaws, and it just was not addressed in the current SWAC bylaws. So it's just talking about that they can be formed as needed for either ad hoc or potentially long-term need, but that they would be appointed by the SWAC. The members the subcommittees would be appointed by the SWAC chair from among those that are potentially volunteering, and that the subcommittees report back to the full SWAC committee at a regular SWAC meeting following a subcommittee meeting, so that they would, that they would need to continue to, take minutes and report back to the full committee. So that was an addition, as was the next item, which is it was 2K, which is number 6 on the list up there. And this was again a clarification that we saw in virtually every other SWAC bylaws from the other jurisdictions regarding compensation, or essentially the lack of compensation, that members of SWAC shall serve without compensation. So that it was just clear that there's no stipend or anything else along that line for providing service in this group. Again, that was just a clarification. There was a minor piece in section 3B regarding minutes and agendas that says the minutes of the meetings are being kept by, where previously it said the secretary, now it says public works staff. It's a little broader definition. The next item would be in section 3D. Again, this is a smaller piece related to quorum. And it's just adding a word that says the simple majority of the seated voting members of the committee shall constitute a quorum. So it's just clarifying that vacant positions aren't included in that calculation. The minor change was made to the meeting agenda in section 3E. Basically, this is the outline for the agendas that we use for our meetings every month. So on item number 3 is introductions. They're striking the words of guests, but it's introductions of everybody, and that's the way that we've been doing it. So not as members, guests, staff, etc. So everybody gets introduced. So that was that clarification. And then the addition on that agenda of adding a solid waste manager update. So near the end of the agenda, the solid waste manager, well, myself in this case, gives updates about various projects, other items of interest related to solid waste management to the full SWAC. So we're adding that as a regular agenda item where that did not exist previously. Moving down to section 6. It has to do with amendments. So currently, this has to do with making changes in the bylaws. They need to be approved by 2/3 majority vote of the quorum, and then approval by the Board of County Commissioners, as you see is mentioned there. Previously, it had been prior notice of 30 days shall be given to the SWAC before taking a mandatory action, and that they wanted to reduce that to 15 days because with the 30 days, what they found that their concern was a lot of times there was less than 30 days between a SWAC meeting 1 month to the SWAC meeting to the next month. So they figured 15 days would be sufficient notice, but would get them away from having the issue of, wanting to make an amendment at one meeting to vote on it the next month, but not having that sufficient 30 days, depending on how the calendar played out. And additionally, in that section, the notice has to be given in writing because that wasn't specifically mentioned. It could have been oral, so they wanted to be specific to that notice is in writing. And lastly, there was an addition of a section 7, a severability clause, which did not exist, and again is typical in many contracts and in many various bylaws. Is just that should any portion of the bylaws be declared basically unconstitutional or otherwise contrary to law, such decision would not affect the validity of the remaining portion. So if one section was not good, the rest still remains intact.
Jeff, you want to hyphenate that bylaws so it's consistent in the severance clause?
Excuse me?
In the severance clause, 7,
Oh,
you've got bylaws hyphenated and unhyphenated. It sounds like it looks like it's hyphenated for most of the document.
oh, okay. Yeah, you are correct. I see what you're talking about. Okay, yeah, we'll make that change. Yeah, matter of fact, it's twice in that same sentence. Very good.
Questions from the board on these proposed changes?
Nope.
Yeah, I got one.
Go for it.
Under 2C, did the group discuss on this appointment on a vacancy? So if someone vacates for whatever reason, and they have 3 months left, then they're just kind of there for 3 months and they don't know anything and maybe aren't even an asset, where if a new term started at that point in time, they could be building knowledge. It just seems like we end up with somebody that might not know anything on that, but just, maybe you guys discussed it, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, that was an interesting. That was discussed. That's where they wanted to go. I know if there was only 3 months left in somebody's term, for example, and they left, and it would typically take more than 3 months to get a recruitment and get applications and where we then at that point would be, able to fill for a new recruitment for the full 3 years. But I think we had one recently where or relatively recently, where it was like about a year and a half in, the individual left and they basically filled in that year and a half. And I believe when that term ended, they applied for reappointment.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a way around it. So that's the only thing I saw of any issue with me is the possibility of somebody being in a position not knowing very much and really not being a benefit. I mean, we all start out in that position anyway, but it takes a little while to learn the process.
Certainly.
3 months later, they'll be in the same boat though, starting the term.
Well, if they did do the reappointment and such.
Well, you're just saying if their only intent was to fill out somebody's term.
Yeah,
They wouldn't have enough time
to know what's going on.
but probably they wouldn't agree to do that unless they were planning to stick around.
Well, except I don't know who makes appointments in which jurisdiction.
That's true.
You know, I just wonder, I just asked the question. I'm not for or against, I'm just saying, did that get talked about? Because you're right, you can reappoint somebody.
Yeah, and related to that, on the 2C, the 2B, it speaks about the Board of County Commissioners shall appoint all the members, which that is on point. But in the proposed language, when a vacancy occurs, it seems to be a strong mandate for the board to shall be filled with the remainder of the term. Is the shall too strong, considering that, sometimes there is not an opportunity, they don't have any applicants, because we struggle sometimes to receive applicants. So I'm just curious if that was discussed in terms of the vacancy shall be filled, which the appointment is done by the Board of County Commissioners.
I don't believe they discussed the difference between a shall and a may on that particular statement.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I don't remember that conversation at all, so.
Well, I think probably what they mean, there's an ambiguity, Ramiro was pointing out, but clearly I think what they meant is if you're filling it, you shall fill it for the remainder of the term. You don't start the term over or whatever. I mean, you could put something like, if filled, the vacancy shall be filled for the remainder of the term. To make it clear that we're not
If that is the
required.
intent, I think it probably works. But the way I took it, just following it seems to be this more of a mandate for the board to shall fill that position. But
Yeah, we don't have control over that, right? I mean,
exactly.
we have to wait for the jurisdiction to proffer its.
Then you'll be in violation of your own bylaws.
Yeah, that's the only thing I saw that piqued an interest. I am not jumping on it one way or the other.
I wouldn't be opposed to adding that language, if filled, a vacancy shall be,
So a vacancy, it could say a vacancy, comma, if filled, comma, shall be for the remainder of the term of the vacant position.
I think that clarifies it.
yeah,
Kind of a wordsmith.
yeah.
You get that, Jeff?
I believe so. It's if filled,
A vacancy,
the
comma,
vacancy shall be for the remainder of the term.
No, say, I want to change it a little bit. A vacant, because at this point, if filled doesn't make any sense because there's been no reference to vacancy. So you want to say a vacancy, comma, if filled, comma, shall be for the remainder of the term of the vacant position in the manner described for an initial appointment.
Jeff, Angela's on the line, so
Okay.
she's taking notes, so you're good. We've got it. We're tracking.
I'm scratching quickly here.
Okay.
Okay. My question then will be, we may need to take this back to SWAC, or do we not, I mean, as far as process, because this would be a change on what they sent to you, and that, but the board, I guess, potentially, I have a question about process here.
Does it really need to go back to SWAC to have concurrence?
Because there was a change, even though it was minor, it just has to be, I think maybe just that section will go to SWAC and just say but I think they have to kind of reapprove it again and then it comes back to us.
We can't approve it unless they've approved it.
That's my question. So is the decision of the board pending on pre-approval by the SWAC?
I mean, we could do it as a courtesy, but I'm skeptical that we have to
Yeah,
have their agreement.
I was just looking at section 6, which is amendments. But it says new bylaw, basically may be amended, and new bylaws may be adopted by 2/3 majority vote of the quorum of approval of the quorum for SWAC and approval by the BoCC.
Okay, well then, I guess we do go back to SWAC.
Maybe number 6 needs to be amended.
We go back to SWAC for that anyway.
Well,
I'm sorry I brought it up.
No, but the thing is, what is the latitude the board has? Because in here it seems to be procedural. So if they don't agree some of the proposed changes by a committee, they're bound to either approve as is. If they provide any perspective, they're bound to go back and get approval by the board. That doesn't seem to be adequate. So that's my editorial comment.
I think I would say it does say may in there. Maybe.
Yeah, but that may is not about how you get to the amendment. It's about it's a path, it's an open door to being able to do it by this procedure.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think we have to go back to SWAC based on section 6.
Okay, we can do that at their January meeting and with the new wording and get approval. The next step, of course, would the board like to have a briefing again post change, or would
No.
putting an AIS forward for approval?
Yeah, I mean, be clear, this was just to really, I think the board believes that this is just clarifying their intent. We're not trying to add something.
Exactly.
Ramiro's pointing out that it reads as if we're forced to fill a vacancy, which doesn't really fit with the way we go about business. So this should be a very friendly amendment, I would think,
I would believe so.
of just clarification.
Exactly.
Even your severance clause little thing could be looked at, if you didn't.
Right. You're right on point.
Yeah. Okay, so it's 2:26, are we good then? Yeah, what you need, Jeff?
I believe I do.
Okay, very good.
Just to clarify, no need to come back with a briefing, just submit an AIS when ready.
Perfect. We can do that.
Thank you. All right, 2:26, we're going to adjourn this work session. We're back with another work session immediately regarding a docket code item regarding place of worship code amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.